grain elevators, traders, big companies, small companies, they've had access to these tools forever. They're using this, and I'm not saying using it against you. They're using it for their benefit. What Snark is offering with Go Farm Yourself is part of that tool, that technology that we've never had before.
Ladies and gentlemen, farmers, ranchers, and distinguished guests, thank you for listening to the Farm4Profit podcast, where we discuss the latest ideas, methods, trends, and techniques available to help your farm achieve higher levels of farm profitability. The Farm4Profit podcast is co-hosted by Tanner Winterhoff, the Iowa Bankerman, and David Whitaker, the Iowa Land Guy, where in tandem they will share their ideas and advice from industry experts. Thank you again for listening to the Farm4Profit podcast. Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long. And now, here's Tanner and David.
Hey listeners, welcome to the Farm4Profit podcast. This is Tanner Winterhoff, known as the Iowa Bankerman. We're here Labor Day, so have a fantastic Labor Day weekend and enjoy this episode. This show is recorded on the last day of the Farm Progress Show in 2022. We want to thank everybody for coming out and seeing us, making this show and the after party a fantastic opportunity for us to get to see you as the listeners and have some really good conversations. This intro is going to be just a little bit different because the conversation we're going to dump you into is a live Twitter Spaces between Rupert Williams, also known as Snarkosaurus, and Cale Carlson at Lead Farms on Twitter, to where they frequently have conversations as such around commodity markets and what they look like. But Snark has been on the show before and introduced you to GFY.AG, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about the advancements that he's had. But since markets are closed today on Monday, Labor Day, we wanted to get this out to you right away and have some timely information in your pocket. We're not going to do a listener review this time because all of the conversations we had with you guys is the review. So we just need to say thank you to everybody and thank you for making our show experience wonderful. We need to say thank you to Sukup Manufacturing. If you need a steel shed, a grain bin, a grain dryer, any grain handling equipment, make sure you check up www.sukup.com. Also, Gearinghoff. Remember that they are ahead of the class no matter the crop. But that's enough from me. We thank you so much as a listener for hanging out and for tuning in every single week. Hopefully you enjoy this conversation and learn a little bit about possibly the future of commodity marketing. Here we go. We'll jump right in.
So we are here at Farm Progress Show 22. If you're walking outside of the Sukup still building, please walk in. We're going to do a little live Twitter Spaces with Snarkosaurus and Cale Carlson. They do a Twitter Spaces all the time. Seems like not quite daily, but talk about GFY.AG and markets and farming and all that kind of stuff, what's going on. So we're kind of let them steer the show, but we'll be here to rope them back in. So yeah,
good luck.
Happy to have them.
Yeah.
So welcome, guys. Give just a little background about yourself, and then we can get right into the spaces.
Okay, we'll start with should we just start with the
Snark.
disclaimer?
Yep, Rupert.
Yeah, okay. Hey, my name is Rupert Williams, Snarkosaurus on Twitter. If you follow me, I am a former Chicago Board of Trade floor trader. So don't shoot me all at once. We have a mic here for questions. We're going to talk about markets. We're going to talk about how the world's changed as far as marketing goes and different things you can do with bins and in marketing in general, like what tools are available, what's out there. And we started Go Farm Yourself, GFY.AG, a year ago, basically. We were on your Farm for Fun show, right, Corey?
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun, but we didn't really have a product back then. All we had was an algorithm named Karen, and all Karen did was predict price one day in the future. And I thought this would be a great product. We came on the show, talked about it, even told everybody where it was going to be the next day. And the market had a 20-cent range, and it closed within 2 ticks. So that was pretty exciting. And then Karen started being a Karen, and she started lagging and not really listening to the data. And so then we tried to figure out what to do with Karen. So we built Vicky, and Vicky's like that crazy personal trainer that got Karen new hair, makeup, new attitude, lost some weight, the whole deal. And then she started getting really cocky. And so she was more predictive, which was good. but then her error rate went up, which is everything in machine learning. So then we had to marry her to Steve. And like any good marriage, Karen makes decisions about 75% of the time, and Steve makes them about 25. And so what that means is when Karen is too aggressive in her predictions and she's wrong, Steve tells her to calm down a little bit and stay in her lane. And when she gets too passive, he starts to push her back the other way to follow more what Vicky's doing. And then we have an algorithm named Dick. And Dick is the algorithm that gets on the highway and sets the GPS. If you guys use GPS, it's similar to that, except with numbers and markets. And so we feed all these numbers into a machine, and the machine reads it. So that's how GPS works. That's how a lot of algorithms that you see on your tractors and other things work. They take in a bunch of data, and then they try to delineate accuracy. And so what Dick does is Dick gets on the highway and he sets the GPS and will not veer from the route no matter what. He won't get off the highway. He won't go down back roads. He won't go down gravel roads. He's just going from here to Omaha, and he's going down I-80. If there's an accident 2 hours away, he's not veering off the route, and Vicky will drive all over the place. And then we have Ginger. And like any true redhead, she teaches you some things you shouldn't know, and then she loves you until she hates you, until she loves you again, because she's soulless. And so Ginger reads all the algorithms, weights them, and then when they align and they're congruent with what's happening in the markets, she makes a trade. So what's fun about this is, as a former trader, I used to see all the trade happen in front of me and thought, okay, well, I can see this trade happening. I can see the market moving this way or this way just based on order flow. Well, now so much of the trade is robots, right? So we talk about Chicago all the time, and Chicago doesn't know what's going on and this and that, but Chicago has changed. Chicago is now just a global clearing price. So if 90% of the trade is computers, you need a computer to help you sort through the noise of all. So like when you read news now, or you get a headline, or you get something, that is already showing up in the price action, right? Robots read other robots and they all trade off each other. Well, we reverse engineered what they're doing, or tried to, and so we built our own. So what we have is a proprietary momentum index. So markets don't move so much on price anymore as they do on momentum, right? So when momentum runs out, think about like a rocket ship taking off from gravity, and as gravity is pulling on it, it either needs to increase in speed or it's going to roll over and go back the other way. I mean, we've seen that in corn and soybeans just this week alone. We had corn up 18 cents or so on Monday. Ginger sold out her longs. I didn't know why. I was like, well, this is now going back to $7. Pro Farmer Tour was at 168. If we have a 168 national yield, there is no carryout next year, right? We're at pipeline. Pipeline means that the price has to go somewhere to slow people down from buying corn, whether that's feeding cattle, ethanol, crush margins, whatever. So that being said, market then they're pulling on each other, right? So soybeans had some rain, and everybody thinks soybeans are going to be this great crop, and we all know, if we're honest and we look in our fields and look at our neighbors and everybody else, this crop's going to be highly variable. So I said at the beginning of the week, well, if corn's going higher and soybeans can have a reason to go lower and not go higher with, they're going to drag on each other. So corn won on Monday with big volume, and then soybeans have won the rest of the week. And so that's kind of the beginning of it. And so I feel like I should throw out the disclaimer before Cale talks.
You say your disclaimer, and then Cale needs to talk.
Okay, real quick. Futures and options offer unlimited risks. They're not suitable for all investors. Doing anything I say or do via this podcast, listening live, or on the interwebs, or at any point, you'll lose all your money and then some. We believe in personal accountability at Go Farm Yourself, so anything I say or any speaker says is their opinion, whether or not they say it's their opinion. So if you're listening or listening later, you're listening at your own risk. That should cover the lawyers.
Right. Cale, that was a long intro there, Snark. Cale, who are you?
I can't believe I waited this long to talk. Did you see how good I was right there by not?
Impressive.
That was impressive.
I was, yeah. Anyway, hello. My name is Cale Carlson. I farm in south central Nebraska with my father and my daughter. Farm about 2,000 acres, row crop, corn and soybeans, and we also raise some seed corn as well, too. I own and operate Lead Farms, which is the acronym for my 5 children. Married, just celebrated my 23rd year of marriage with my lovely bride. And that's about it. Actually, there's a lot more to it, but I don't know how much you want me to go into my bio. I've been farming for over 20 years.
So you're central Nebraska, so you're irrigated, right?
Yes, 100%.
So that
heavily
helps.
irrigated. It helps big time. Yeah, otherwise we probably wouldn't be farming or farming what we are without living on top of an ocean of water.
So Snark mentioned all these crazy robot names and all that. What is GFY to you? Go Farm Yourself.
So GFY is a tool that we built.
I meant, what is it to Kale?
I think he was talking to me.
Yeah, because you said it.
The attention is on me now, Snark. So being a farmer for the last 20 years, getting into marketing, Dad hated marketing. I didn't know much about it, but Dad gave it up and said, Cale, you're in charge of all the marketing. I'm like, oh, great. You can win or lose, thousands of dollars. The pressure's on me, which is fine. The more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it. Started getting into social media and following brokers, traders, other farmers, seeing what's happening in their neck of the woods, in other states, and realizing we are in a global market. So for the last 10, 12 years, especially on Twitter, Ag Twitter, following all of these traders and marketers and farmers and just trying to do a better job, trying to learn as much as I can. I've known Snark for a very long time, and he built an algorithm, a platform. I was very curious because I knew, they closed the pit, they closed the live trading with humans, and it's more and more robots and computers, which is fine. That's the way of technology and the way of the world. And Snark found a genius, or knew a genius from before, computer programmer. Jefferson built this whole thing and put it together and visited my farm one day. He's like, Cale, I'm thinking about putting this all together so I can trade a lot better. And then he said, I want to offer it to farmers. What do you think of it? I'm like, well, I'll take a peek at it. I love doing beta testing at anything, especially with having to do with markets. I think it's a great idea. Jumped right in, saw what it was, started to understand it, and then started to make my sales of corn based on what Ginger was saying, or what Go Farm Yourself is. Taking whatever information they had, based on these algorithms, machine learned trading, and trading on my own farm, and it has been wonderful and amazing 80% of the time.
Well, that's what it's all about, right? Because you can't be right all the time.
No, and there was like a 45-day stretch, and that's why I said past performance is not indicative of future results. On this rally up in the spring, this is when we had been testing it, back testing it for about 6 months, and then October, November, we started paper trading it, and then January, we went live with it ourselves internally. And I went to my investors and I said, what if we took all the sale alerts, and sent those out as text messages to producers, and that they pay a small subscription fee, and they get a text alert every time our robot makes a trade. And they said, why would you do that? Why would you give that to farmers? And I said, why not give it to farmers, right? And so this is one of the things for me as an outsider, right? I've been traveling all over rural America since the pits closed in 2014, and I found out I really like driving combines and tractors and breaking stuff, just like any good hired man would. And so I thought there's a way for everyone to win, right? So what you have now with markets is this battle between commercials and producers, right? Producers have the product, commercials need the product, right? That's a classic market. That's a real market. And then you've got these group in the middle that you have speculators and you have market makers. Well, back in the day when the pits were opened, market makers made up about 30 or 40% of the trade. Nowadays, the market maker, which is the robot, right? This high frequency trading you probably heard about or learned about or seen at some point or heard someone talking about, is like 90% of the trade. Well, if they're 90% of the trade, if I was making 90% of the trade in the pit, or a group of us were, we would be in market regulation so fast, wondering if we're manipulating price or whatever. That's not to say that the prices are manipulated. What it is to say is that markets are fundamentally different now. The markets we have today are not even the markets we had 3 years ago. And you can see that in the way the market moves, right? Everybody's holding out for $10 corn this year because $8 and $10. And we've had this discussion on our spaces, and I said, well, the market doesn't care what you think. And it cares even less about what you think now than ever, because a robot has no soul. That's why we named it Ginger. So it sounds funny, but I I'll leave that personal story out, but it just, when we came to naming the robots, because we call them all these VF432-6, like we're doing science experiments, and I couldn't keep track of them. And so I asked Jefferson, my co-founder, who's a super nerd, and I mean that in the, the most endearing way. I said, well, what does this one do? And he says, well, it does this, and it won't listen to anything I tune it to. Like, think about the soundboard right here. He's just doing that typing on a keyboard and getting the algorithms to perform closer to the actual price. And it's called predictive analytics. And so the more the machine gets the information, so think your Casey's Rewards or some rewards program you have, they have a whole profile on you. They can tell you you'll buy beer on Tuesday, sorry, family show, you'll buy a candy bar on Tuesdays if it's 20 cents off or 2 for $5 or whatever. And so the world is moving to this dynamic pricing in general. And Jefferson was working for a big data company, and he said, I can't do this anymore. And like any good Zoomer, I said, well, you exchange your time for money. And then when you have enough money, you buy your time back. That's how the world works. And so he quit his job last year, and he was head of data at a $1.3 billion startup, and he said, I can't do this anymore. It's sucking my soul. So all that being said, then we started Go Farm Yourself, and that's how we started building the algorithms. But what I love about it more than anything for my own trading is it's an unbiased data point. I even said Friday, I said the market's going higher. We're going to be higher on Monday. Let's see what happens. Well, the market goes higher, confirms everybody's technical breakout, blah, blah, blah. And then today we're down back at 655. Well, how did that happen and why? Well, that's because the momentum dried up and they stopped buying, and it was too extreme of a speed, right? So think about that rocket taking off has too much fuel or is going too fast too early. It's going to run out of speed. Does it hit outer space or does it fall back into the earth? And if it falls back into the earth, where's it going? Is it going to hit a mountain and stop here and then build a new thing, or is it going to go into the ocean and keep sinking? And so that's what we're trying to measure. And what's been fascinating to watch about it is it's actually kind of how the markets used to work when we were in the pit. There'd be 200 people, but we couldn't agree on what to get for lunch, even though the same 5 guys got the same lunches every day from the same places. We'd fight about it for hours. Well, that's a competitive market. Now, it's not that the markets aren't competitive, but they're competitive between producers and commercials. And so you've got this endless tug of war. And what I can't figure out as an outsider is how a producer is getting information or market information from the guy trying to buy his grain. That just fundamentally doesn't make sense to me.
I want to go back just for here
Okay.
1 minute.
Sorry.
And you keep, you said yourself an outsider, but you visited over 300 farms
Yep.
in the last, I don't know
Since
how many years
2014.
doing your farm tours. And he's been out to my farm a couple times. I've never met an outsider love the farm and farmers and community so much and wanting to learn so much. How much irrigation, last time you came out to my place, irrigation did we do that you learned about? So where I'm going with this, the fact that you built GFY.AG and then instead of just using it for yourself, you're sharing it, giving it access to us farmers. I really appreciate that. I can see your love and dedication for the farmer.
Well, I think that's what's fun about it, right? Now I get to do something that hopefully helps my bottom line, but can help other people as well. And that's what my co-founder Jefferson loves about it too. It's like now he's doing something that's worthwhile. Before he was making profiles on people, selling it to big companies that would then use that against you to buy your grain or do whatever. Not grain, he wasn't affiliated with grains at all, but consumer products. And so for us, it's really rewarding to see the reason it's called GFY, right? Go Farm Yourself. We're trying to give you a tool to help you make your own decisions. So for me, as a former trader, it's kind of the ultimate FU to an industry that told me to F off because they automated my job with computers.
Watch your language. This is a family show.
Sorry. I thought that was...
He abbreviated it.
Yeah, you're doing very
We
good.
do have
Forget
we have a
you.
question from FFA
Awesome.
kid in the crowd. What's your name?
Porter.
Porter?
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. What's your question?
So I'm an FFA, and so how is this going to help me in a marketing standpoint in the future?
Thank you.
I'd like to jump in and answer that. What Snark was just saying as far as being a tool in the toolbox, and Go Farm Yourself is Go Farm Yourself. So I do a lot of the trading on my own, and I'm looking for advice and throughput to help make decisions. And since a lot of the market now is automated and controlled by computers and high frequency trading, it's one thing, it's looking at that. It's something I've never had before in any of the newsletters that I'm reading or just watching market quotes. It gives me that extra little nudge to make a decision because, I don't know, should kale sell grain today or not? I don't know. What's ginger say?
How does it deliver that information?
I get real-time text alerts. So a lot of times when I'm out working, I get a text alert that's saying that the market is moving, something's happening in corn and soybeans or cotton, even markets that I could trade on my own, but I'm not actually growing. I get an idea, and they're like, Kale, do you want to make a decision or not? I'm like, well, I've been feeling like I want to sell another 10% of new crop. Market's higher, ginger's making a sale. I'm just going to call it in. And then if it's right or wrong, I'm going to blame ginger. And that's really helpful to me, so I don't have to blame Dad or Laura or talk about it with my wife later on. So it's just one tool in the toolbox that has helped me. So I think that can help you in the future. I believe it is the future for farmers making better, more informed marketing decisions.
I think there's also an online aspect too, as well, right, Snark?
Well, what we're trying to do also is build a community, right? So one of the hard things about farming that I've noticed over the years is I'm lucky. I get to travel all over the United States, meet on farms, see how different people do different things, right? And sometimes in your local environment, it's tough to talk to your neighbor about what you're doing that's working and not working. One, because you don't want them to know what's not working. And two, if something is working, you don't want to really talk to them. But a guy that farms 100, 200 miles away, like Kale, and he's trying this, we've had all kinds of collaboration on the spaces, just talking about different your soybeans and PGR and stuff like that. And to me, I think that's where this is going, right? Like, you have to have a high yield mindset in this day and age, right? This is not 1970 where you can farm 1/4 and feed your whole family, right? There's no more arable land in the United States. We got inflation at 9%. So either prices have to increase 9% or your inputs have to go down 9% or some combination of all of that, or your marketing has to get better by 9% just to stay right with inflation, right? We didn't, apparently we don't understand what inflation is in this current administration, but if we keep just spending money and lighting it on fire, inflation's not going anywhere. Okay, so what does that mean for a farmer? You got to farm more land. Well, there's no more arable land in the United States. So if you look at this from a global macro perspective, you've got, when I started trading corn in 2004, I want to say, we were 60% of the crop. And I think nowadays we're like 35%, and that number's dropping every year, right? You got South America burning down the entire rainforest to plant grains, which, whatever. And then you've got Ukraine, and you've got, obviously there's no more land in Europe, et cetera. But what's different about this year that makes things even more challenging from what do you do? You've got this, this war going on in basically the Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana of Eastern Europe, right? Whether you want to call it Asia, whatever, Eurasia, it doesn't really matter.
The size, or what you're talking about?
Just the size of the crop, and they're a big exporter. Well, now they've been taken offline, and they've got something going on, but that doesn't mean prices need to stay high forever, right?
No, we need to. We're constantly, us and the entire world is constantly trying to feed and fuel the world. So it's just not America anymore. We got to think more globally, and that's a lot of these grains being traded are on a global market, and the entire world is all connected as well too. So what can I do? What can Kale do on my farm to make myself viable? Obviously trying to raise the yields, but then also getting the price that I get for my crop as well too. And I need real time, all news, media information is in real time. We're living in real time. Stuff is happening right now. I can see it on Twitter. I can see it on my text alerts. In any of the news medias. Well, for the grain market, if something is moving and something is happening and I'm out in the tractor, I need notification right now.
And going off that topic as well, you look at where we're at in corn and soybeans right now. Well, the corn crop is pretty much finished at this point. Wouldn't you agree? Like, it still has some fill, but it's not going to move more than 2 or 3 bushel either way.
I am still running irrigation, but all my dryland corners,
putting some test weight on.
They're I'm
right.
Going for that test weight. Dryland corners are done. Yes, corn's done.
Well, and so now you've got the market. So if you think about Chicago, dare I say it, and the board. The board is a global clearing price. And so you've seen basis, especially this year and the last couple of years, move all over the place. Well, one market I know that the farmer can beat all day long versus Chicago is their local basis. You know your historical basis, you know things that are happening. And so that's the goal. If you are a basis trader, you still have to understand what's going on in Chicago, right? So we had $8 board corn, right? $8.19, $8.23, $8.24 earlier this year in July, and ginger sold $8.19. And basis was strong, but it's not strong like it is now. Except, okay, so let's say you had 20-cent basis on that, so you're at $8.40. Well, that's obviously an amazing price, but people are like, I'm holding out for $9, $10. Well, then the board drops from, and that was such a great question, by the way, on how you can use this, because I think that's the challenge for people is like, why would you give this to me? Well, I'm trading off it too, but the market's so big, there's not one person that controls the market anymore, right? When I stood on the floor, we had a little bit more power to kind of try to stop the market or get run over and die.
It takes both, a buyer and a seller.
Right. And so now you have the market at 840, and then we dropped to 570, and basis started increasing. Okay, well, basis increased, but your actual cash price of your grain actually went way down.
Snark, can you stop for just 1 second? We've got quite a bit of novices on the farm-for-profit side of things. I know everyone in the spaces is probably pretty smart, but what is basis?
Okay, so basis is the difference between your cash price and the Chicago Board of Trade, right? And so that basis is usually moves around based on logistics. So it's the cost to move grain from one place to the next, and then that basis plus or minus is the difference from Chicago.
Okay. I just wanted to just get that out there. I mean, sometimes we get a lot of questions and emails from people that are like just starting out or don't know some of this stuff. So sometimes you have to almost go back to the elementary style just to explain what you're talking about.
Correct. Basis also helps. Another function of basis is to help move grain from where it is to where it needs to be. So if there's these pockets, like we were talking about, the corn crop this year, we've got some places that had really good rain, and then just one county over, they didn't get much rain. So they're going to be maybe a grain deficit. So the function of basis, it'll be a higher basis or more money paid to get volume and grain flowing in that direction from where it is to where it needs.
It's local supply and demand.
Correct. Yes.
Yep.
Kind of basic economics.
Yep.
Well, and what's also interesting about that, specifically this year, let's speak to this year. If you go east of I-35, north and south in Iowa, sliver in Minnesota, and Illinois, you're going to have a record. Okay. Well, most of Illinois' corn goes down the river, and all of the eastern Iowa corn stays in eastern Iowa, right? So now you got all the cattle guys out west, and Nebraska and kale
and down south
support that, and south in Kansas. Well, south of I-70 just completely burned up during pollination. Okay, so now if all the cattle are in the west, and corn usually moves west to east, but there's no corn in the west, the western corn belt, how high does basis need to go to justify somebody shipping it out of their local market all the way to western Nebraska or central Nebraska or wherever? And so I think that's where basis is going to be really important in this coming year, especially once we get through post-harvest, the piles, et cetera. Once farmers have sold what they need to sell off the combine or don't have storage for or have forward sold, which you probably got a really good price for, and now there's that battle between the market, right? You got your corn in the bin, and you got commercials that need that corn to either crush ethanol, feed cattle, feed livestock, whatever, and all these areas that have struggled this year in the South that feed all the chicken, all the hogs, right? How do they get corn? What price do they have to pay? And so I was actually talking with Chad Henderson from extremeag.farm, and he's from Alabama, and he said, our crop went from this to this and just burned up. And he said, but, the basis will be way higher this year, and so either way we get the same money. And he said, well, if we grow a huge crop, the basis goes way down. And so that's where having all the tools in the toolbox for your marketing versus just, I think it's going to go higher in my local market, or I think it's going to go higher here, where there's a whole bunch of moving parts there. And that's where Ginger, Go Farm Yourself, that's where we're trying to help you sort through the noise of Chicago, right? Because you could listen to any talking head, myself included, right?
High five.
And I could give you a bunch of stories on why the market needs to go higher, right? You've got drought in China, you've got South America, which has a good crop, you've got Ukraine shut down, you've got drought in Europe, drastic drought for them. So how does grain move in that scenario out of the United States? Well, we consume so much of it. Basis is really going to have to pay for it, or the Board of Trade is going to have to rally really high, and business people are going to start making decisions. We're going to go from full bore on ethanol down to 20 hours, or they're going to start shutting their plants down or slow down their throughput.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to bring up as well, too, Snark. You just reminded me of this. Have a conversation with your local buyer, your local co-op, and find out what is the grain sheet, bid sheet this year as you're hauling in. How much will shrink be? How much will drying costs be? So you can kind of figure out, do you want to start harvesting some bushels early, or do you want to wait a little bit, let it dry down in the field? A lot of those sheets are being changed now with the price of natural gas and inputs for local buyers and co-ops. You might be surprised at what some of those changes are. So before you haul to your market, you might want to take a peek at those. That's something I did just yesterday. Have some conversations with your merchandiser or buyer to see what the shrink will be and drying costs on some of those bushels.
Yeah, we've seen some interesting deals that they were talking about. Haul it in right now. Wasn't that you? There's no dock or something? Or
yeah, it was something. There's no shrink, and maybe just 4 or 8 cents per point per bushel up to a certain amount to get some of that early corn in. I think a lot of end users and elevators are running out of that old crop corn, and with all the storms that rolled through, a lot of hail and replant, it might be just a little bit later harvest than normal this year. So they're doing incentives to get grain moving again.
One of the things that I also think is interesting on that is this is the third year in a row that Store and Ignore is going to win. And Store and Ignore is a marketing strategy, right? But
doing nothing is a strategy.
It is absolutely a strategy, and forward selling is a strategy. And where I think guys get hurt a lot with both of those types of strategies is they try to change it up in the middle. And then they don't know what to do because they haven't developed a process on what to do. And so they're just kind of waiting to see what the market's going to do. Well, that can work until it doesn't. And so that's something that, like, I say it tongue in cheek, but when the Store and Ignore crowd has really, it's paid to store your grain, right? And it's easy to look right now and say, well, we just heard you say, Snark, it could be this, this, and this. We should store our grain. Okay, so you get through the early harvest piles, whatever. What does it take to pry the grain out of a grain bin for a farmer to sell moving forward, especially into the first quarter of next year and beyond? And let's say there's no macro meltdown and it's not the end of the world like we're always reading on or hearing on TV and whatever, and interest rates are going to $1 billion and this is the 80s all over again, and
$8, Bob.
Right. And so, okay, well, if you're waiting for that price and then the price goes higher and then you're like, well, now, that whole cancel of close, it becomes really hard to make a decision to sell that grain. And I think that's where I think Go Farm Yourself as a tool, GFY, Ginger, can really help you sort through that noise. If you think it's going higher and you get a text alert from us, hold on to your grain. But pay attention to what she's doing. What I love about it is I can come out here, do all this stuff instead of stare at screens all day, and I'll get a text alert and I'll bring up stuff on my phone and I'll start looking at it. But if she's not doing anything, she's more accurate than I am, and I still don't believe it, and I built it. And it's been fascinating to watch over these, since March.
The nice thing is with Go Farm Yourself is you have access to Snark. And I don't know how long, as his company is growing and he's having more and more subscribers, I don't know how long this is going to last, but you have access to him. So the market will be doing something. Kale gets cold feet. I get weak. I text Snark and I say, hey, what should I do? And it was so refreshing back in June, I think. Don't panic. Just relax. I've been saying, what's Ginger saying? What's the algorithm doing? Nothing. Just relax and be calm. And that was so refreshing. Thanks for that. I was able to sleep. I was actually able to sleep that night.
I'll relay that to Ginger. We're still trying to teach her how to talk. But on that big break, Ginger was actually buying it. And I'm a former trader myself, and I'm like, we're going to die. That was the end of it. It's going to zero. It was all fun and games, just like 2008. And she's buying it the whole way down, 577, 589, 618.
And she's not getting
634.
news reports of war
She
or
knows
expanded acres or
nothing
anything
about
else.
headlines or any of that. It is purely price action. There's no technicals. There's no nothing. She's just buying or selling based on momentum. And if you sign up at GFY.AG and put in an email address, you can have free access to our stoplight, which is just one of our algorithms. That is our slowest algorithm. That may be all you need. That's free. You can use that. If you want to level up and get more precise, then that's where you sign up and pay for Ginger. But that is the baseline algo that we have, which was the first one we built. And that momentum index, just making trades when it gets into the red or staying out of panic selling when it's in the green, you'll find if you look at the price chart over the last couple of years, how well that's actually worked. And what we know about 2021 and 2022 and 2020, those were all crazy marketing years, 3 years in a row. One was COVID, the other two was weather, et cetera.
Keep in mind also, grain elevators, traders, big companies, small companies, they've had access to these tools forever. They're using this, and I'm not saying using it against you. They're using it for their benefit. What Snark is offering with Go Farm Yourself is part of that tool, that technology that we've never had before. When I listen to you on the spaces, talk with other traders out there, you bring up all of these volume, velocity, and volatility, and I've never heard that before. Beta, gamma. Sometimes when you're talking as a trader, I think I understand, but I don't fully understand. And this is something a lot of the industry has been using for years and years and years.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I forget that because it comes so second nature to me. But when we had Brian Wilson on and he's talking about the same things I am, and I'll be honest with you guys, 3 years ago, 2018, 2017, when I was still trying to figure it out, I wouldn't have told, other than my close circle of farmer friends, how this stuff works. But it doesn't matter anymore because everybody has these tools. And what I mean by everybody is I've interviewed at some of the big grain merchandisers, we'll leave their names out of it, and they're like, hey, do you want to work on this managed pricing deal? And you probably heard of like accumulator double ups and this and that. Well, for years, I was on the other side of those trades in the pit. I would never tell anybody how the sausage is made, but it doesn't matter anymore because the markets are different, right? There is a disincentive to educate farmers on how this stuff works so that you panic sell because that's when they make the most money, right? Let's take an accumulator double up. What that is you get a sale price above the market for a period of time unless it gets knocked out, right? The price goes down and there's a knockout. So let's make it easy numbers. Let's say you're agreeing to sell 750 corn. The board right now is at 680, and this is for 2023.
I like those numbers.
And if the price goes down to $6, you get a certain percentage of your grain sold every day at that $7.50 price. Well, it almost seems too good to be true. And I hear that from people, and they're like, well, why would they give me a price above the market? And then I get that much grain sold, but the only catch is if the price goes above 750, I owe double the bushels. Well, a lot of people have been burned by that. Why? Because they did it at $4 and they had a double up at 450 and then the price goes to 750. A lot of our earlier subscribers like, yeah, we did this a year ago. What do I do now? I'm like, well, the price is $7 is too late. But what those trades are designed to do is that company that's offering you that is coming into the open market, into the options market. I'm a former options market maker. So they would quote this trade, I'd be on the other side of it. And what they're doing is they're selling two calls against you're committing your grain basically to Chicago. They're buying an at the money put, and then they're selling a downside put. And that whole package costs, say, we were at $7, you're getting $7.50. That's 50 cents that you're going to collect above the market if this goes all the way out, all the way to expiration. But they're getting like 80 or 90 cents on it, and they're keeping 40. Well, that's okay. They're making the margin calls, and it's a tool, and it's simple to understand. Obviously, I can get a little confusing at times. But as the market breaks, you get knocked out, and you had 100,000 bushels committed, and this is why people hate them, and you only sold 10,000 bushels. Well, think about that for a second. Now you only got 10,000 sold at 750, which is great, but now you've got all this other grain sitting around and go, what do I do with it? And now the price is lower. Well, in certain instances, that's a really good trade for a farmer But you have to understand what those mechanics are. On the other side of that, that person that sold you that owns a put that's now gained in value because the market just dropped $1. They sold 2 calls against it, which now have decreased in value because the market's moved away from that. And they did it on your full 100,000 bushels. So they did 20 contracts, and the other 18, they picked up all the money. And then they gave you a little bit of the money on 10,000 of it. Okay, well, that's just how the market works. Well, you could put that on yourself, but then the risk would be you have to make margin calls for a year if it goes through 750 and you get doubled up. It's still a great trade for you because that might be a good price around your operation, but can you make that margin call? And one of the things I found out working with producers with this stuff is I said, I can put these trades on for you. And we're not brokers. That's important to understand about GFY.AG. We're not brokers. We're not market advisors. We're not any of that stuff. You know, you can get all of that stuff. My goal is to teach people how to do this stuff themselves. You could get all that, but I'll tell you a story because I was a broker there for a hot minute.
I got a quick question.
Shoot.
Sorry to interrupt. What commodities, what products does Go Farm Yourself have right now?
So currently we have corn, soybeans, soybean meal, Kansas City wheat, Minnesota wheat, Minneapolis wheat. We don't do Chicago because we think Chicago is just a volume proxy. I know it's grown worldwide, but it's not relevant to most of the people in the United States. And I said cotton. And we have the NASDAQ, actually, which is one of our best products. Now, that's more for traders and people that like to speculate and whatever. But hopefully we'll have cattle and hogs by the end of the year. They've been really difficult to do. And anybody that's lost a lot of money in the cattle business, like myself, and I'm talking the physical cattle business. I had to leave the floor and then go feed physical cattle to lose all my money. And the problem with livestock is when Ginger reads it, September corn is the same pretty much as December corn. December corn and January corn are the same thing. Now, they might be different crop years, but it's still storable. You can't store a live animal. You have to keep feeding it. And so that difference, that disparity between those months makes it really difficult for the robot to figure out, well, June cattle and April cattle are not the same thing, right? And number one rule of trading cattle on the floor was June cattle always suck. So anybody that's fed cattle knows what I'm talking about, except 2014. That's actually when it worked.
Okay. So, Snark, we're getting over 40 minutes here. I don't want to cut you off on that, but let's go a little bit away from GFY right now. Okay. And just talk some fundamental. Take the thing where you don't have to have emotions in it, and now put your emotions back into it. Let's talk some fundamentals. Markets are getting killed today. It is September 1st. This will come out the following Monday. The Pro Farmer Crop Tour just went through. USDA's got all their numbers out and probably need to be adjusting some down. Where do you feel things are going?
So, great question. If you look at the macro picture, it's easy to make a story on why corn needs to go higher, right? That can be done through basis or the board or whatever. So I think about 680, where we just topped out, is going to be 662 to 667 is going to be really important for corn, December corn, to get above, right? We've seen that in our algorithms. Our algorithms spit out data. And then above that, you've got 702, 704. If you really want some upside, if you can get a closing price above 704, we've really got something, right? To the downside, I think 577 is going to hold. Now, that's really bold. Are we just talking about next week, or are we just talking?
Oh, we're just talking in general.
So I think 577 to the downside is absolutely monstrous. I think if it gets below that, you've got to have some sort of protection on, or start thinking about
what scenario would make it go that low? I mean, just a big yield?
Well, USDA doesn't lower yields, which I think they're going to do. They'll probably come down 1.5 bushels, 2 bushels. They'll slowly walk it into January to what they think it is. Remember, they don't want to lower it down and then have to raise it back up, right? That creates unnecessary volatility. And then they have big commercials that have a lot of deep pockets really mad. So since we all know how the world works, right? Money kind of makes, what's the golden rule, right? He who has the gold makes the rules. So I think corn's got a really solid base underneath it. I think soybeans, we've talked a lot about demand and export demand, and lately we haven't even been able to get the export data on the weekly export data. So who knows what's going
That's
on
correct.
there?
That's interesting. And
Right.
to your point where you said one of the things that could make it go lower, looking at exports, and one of the big factors for exports is the U.S. dollar. We've been seeing some strength in the U.S. dollar, like it's the strongest it's been in over 40 years. So that's naturally going to hurt exports because it costs other countries a lot more money to get the grain and products they need too. So that also is going to be a stumbling block for possible future rallies.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Obviously, we know what's going on in America with inflation and interest rates going higher, and Jerry Powell jawboning interest rates and saying we're going to keep them high for a while to stabilize inflation, even though if they keep doing that and the government keeps forgiving student loans and just printing money, that those two things offset. I don't think they passed that class in college. I have an econ degree from Baylor, shameless plug. So I learned a couple things along the way there that's not actually how money supply works, but nobody's asking my opinion on that. The other thing is soybeans. I think soybeans have a downside story in the sense of right now the trade thinks 51.9 according to USDA. Pro Farmer came out at 51.7. It's very rare that
Sounded like a big number.
It does. And if you know, if you drive as much as I do and you see rows of bean fields that are not canopied at this point, that's just not going to be a big bean yield. Now, don't take my word for it. I know absolutely nothing about this. I can't even keep houseplants alive. I just talked to some really good growers, and knowing how late the planting was, how hot it was this summer, the lack of rain, and now we're getting rain, okay, maybe beans can come back a bit. Maybe they're not as bad. Well, is $14 the right price? $14.15 is a big area. $13.93 has held a number of times.
Yeah, we say this every year. We really won't know until the combines roll every single time. But once we get out in the field, it'll be very interesting to see what some of that variability that we will see out there. One other thing that came out today, and this is maybe, I don't know when it came out, but Farm Future just posted 180 bushel and a 94 million acre for 2023. 94 million acres, corn acres, and a trendline yield of 180 bushels to the acre would be a monster crop.
It was Pro Farmer right
182.
about,
What's that?
I think he said 180 at 94, right? Kale?
I'm looking at Agent 69 over there.
Yeah.
She's saying 182. So 180. So let's talk about trendline yield for a second. Trendline yield is a thing because equipment gets better, techniques get better, all kinds of things, right? Never bet against the American farmer.
Thank you.
But we did 181, or we said it was going to be 181 this year, and then they lowered that aggressively, which I think is good. So I think they'll start high again next year. You know, the 94 million makes a lot of sense, except it doesn't, right?
Because of fertilizer?
Yeah. So if you don't
Price
know where your
and or
inputs are, can
availability?
you get them, et cetera? I think one of the things that happened this year, which is what is part of this bullish fundamental story about supply, is I think it was easy when everybody planted and finally got it in. It looked good for a while, right? All of Iowa looked amazing. And we've just watched that crop just give it up as we got day after day after day after day of no rain, right? I live in Des Moines. It was 17 days of no rain, basically, or measurable. Basically on the whole western half of the state west of I-35. And then you saw that stress on the plant, and beans were planted so late too that they hadn't really had a chance to get as stressed. Now, are beans going to, are we going to get a bunch more rain like we've already had in August and September, and that's going to get that late fill?
Only when I start harvesting. It'll start raining on Kale's farm when I'm in the field.
Yeah. I was going to say, any rain that we've gotten as of late is probably just going to fill what's there. It's not adding yield.
Right,
Yep.
right. So that's your top line.
Yep.
So if you're counting down from that and you get 50 or sub 50 on a national yield on soybeans, well, you got the same problem you had this year. You're at 140 million carryout, which we now know is basically zero. Because we saw that 2 years ago when it was 130, and then it just never moved off that number. And I was like, well, they're still moving beans. So 230 really isn't that big. You've got Shell Rock, the renewable diesel, coming online here, taking bids for December. And in 2 years, you're going to have 10 to 11 plants come online on renewable diesel. I think that's I remember when corn in 04 started to take off. and $3 became the new $2, and $4 and $5 became the new $3, right? As the whole complex was shifting up. To me, this renewable diesel play is exciting. It's an exciting deal for soybeans, and
For sure.
what does that do for demand, right? Like if we're crushing 56 pounds, 60 pounds of beans for 6 pounds of oil, you're going to run out of beans really quick, or meal's going to get really cheap, or some sort of offset. But to me, I think the downside in beans it'll be a tug of war between corn and beans until combines roll. Right?
One thing I try to remind myself, it's a futures market. It's always looking out to the future. So, we're going to be harvesting the 22 crop, the 23 crop. What does it look like? And for me as a farmer, to make a profit, always want to grow the maximum amount of bushels and sell it at the best price possible. But then also we have inputs. And so for right now, I'm 50% sold on my new crop corn. I feel very comfortable at that level, but I've already started booking fertilizer, hopefully that I can apply this fall for my 23 crop. Now I haven't made any 23 sales, but I'm trying to book and make sure I can capture the right amount of fertilizer and the right kind of fertilizer for my 23 crop. This is the earliest that I've ever done before. You keep talking about unprecedented times, what we're seeing in the market. We're also seeing that in the input side of the market as well too. So something to pay attention.
Are you finding inputs up, down, sideways from last year?
About the same as last year. So I think they spiked. A lot of inputs spiked in the summertime. We saw some of them, especially in the fertilizer, soften just a little bit, and that's why I jumped on it. I don't know if it'll go lower from this point, but in the last 3 years, like you've been talking about in the Store and Ignore crowd, the last 3 years, the earlier input prices, the deals, the cash discount have always been the best prices for that.
Input prices are going to skyrocket, right? If you have 8% inflation, 9%, you've got seed corn. Who knows what that looks like this year with the variable weather, et cetera. Farmers have a tax problem this year. It's going to be real easy to see the seed companies or whoever just raise prices because they can. Whether or not they have the crop or not, you don't know. But this game is set up to get your pocket picked every day, right? Like the farmer's only allowed to make money like 1 year, 2 years in a row. And then all these other companies, and I'm not trying to trash any one of them, their goal is to make money too. So if they know you have money and they know there's inflation and there's a story there, why wouldn't they raise the price? And I think you're going to see that big jump in seed this year. That's just my guess. I think we're going to see fertilizer, et cetera, get stupid. You're seeing what's happening. And I mean, you've got a conflict with Russia, sanctions, who knows what. I think, and that was my point about why I think their crops started off, looked good, and maybe they skimped a little bit on fertilizer and other things because it was so expensive. Well, then the weather hit, and that's when it needed that extra energy, right? So I think it's a very difficult market. It's certainly outside my expertise, but just as an outsider looking in, it's easy to make the story that, if your break even last year was $5 or somewhere in that area, it's easy to say it's going to be $5.50, $6. Of course, rents are going to skyrocket. Anybody that's flush with cash is going to farm next year and want to farm more ground.
I was flush with cash until I had to buy inputs for 23 now.
Okay, so
that's not as much fun.
Sell some more old crop.
Fun anymore. I finally did sweep out my bin when I got the auger.
and people so this is actually a good story I heard on Pro Farmer Tour. I was talking with a younger farmer, and he found out what he did, and we were just talking in the lobby, and he said, well, I can get $1.40 over the SEP right now on my last 20,000 bushels of old crop. And I told my dad we should roll it to December and hold on to it, because if this is the real story, then basis next year, et cetera. And I said, well, if you could get $8 right now and you're rolling that 20,000 into, because I asked him, well, what's your D basis, right? Maybe it's different. Well, his D basis is 30 under. I'm like, okay, well, you just had $1.40 over the board and you rolled that to 30 under. That's $1.70 you just took out of that 20,000 bushels. Now you need either the market, the basis, or both as a combination to make that $1.70 back. Mathematically, that doesn't make sense. That's really hard to do. And so that's what I'm saying.
Typically, I want to just put new crop on top of the old crop so my neighbors don't have to see me hauling old crop in at $5. Another thing, we were talking about fertilizer, and also we're buying retail, selling wholesale, and paying the freight on both ways. That's the farmer usually gets.
Sounds like the cattle
pinched.
business.
And the cattle business as well too. There's railroad issues right now. We're not going to probably be able to get into it now. How long does this thing go? How much longer?
Probably need to wrap it up here soon, but keep going.
Rail issues is something to really pay attention to. There's an upcoming date, September 15th, with between the union and the railroads. It's also taking a lot of our fertilizers, a lot of our inputs. Some of our inputs come from foreign countries, and it's becoming more and more difficult to get those from foreign countries because of supply chain issues, transportation, trucking, and
Well, we need to get it out. We need to
Rails are
ship
big.
ethanol, and we need to ship DDGs. So I
ship
mean,
it out,
it's both ways.
ship inputs in. Correct.
So we've had a good discussion here. We're sitting in the Sukup Steel building here, right next to the Big Bin, and perfect place for store and ignore, right?
That's right. That's
And
why I thought this is a
I
perfect
do want you guys to both plug your social medias again and GFY one more time for anybody that's new in the audience.
Okay, so you can find us on Twitter at GFY_AG. The website is GFY.AG.
And what does it do one more time? Not the whole thing.
Computer-based trading algorithm.
Computer-based trading algorithm, peace of mind through data. Take the emotion out of your marketing through data.
Also, if you'd like to save a little money on your subscription, I'm not sure if this promo code still works, but
does.
if you use promo code Cale Carlson, CALECARLSON 22, all caps, you'll save some money.
I heard you're going to be building a Sukup bin just from what you've made off that.
I can't wait to build a Sukup bin. Do they have any old crop corn or beans in any of these bins that we could sweep out?
I bet they wish they did.
I want to smell what that smells like. I've already heard that. I know the market's telling you to hold beans instead of corn at harvest because of the carry, but nobody wants to sweep out beans. I've never done it, but I've heard it's pretty bad. So,
especially if they get wet.
Oh, and you step in it?
It's one of the worst.
It's worse than dog poo.
We've got a list. Laura and I have a list on the whiteboard at the farm. Best smells on the farm, worst smells. That one is right up there.
Are you making candles out of the good ones? Drying corn.
We should.
Fresh cut alfalfa.
A rain.
Yeah. Fresh turned dirt.
Yep.
I also want to say thank you for the time, all of you listening. I see a bunch of our agents. We got agent, Jesse, what are you? 42, 114, 69, agent 6, Corey, you're 44.
Probably.
And agent number 10.
10.
Cale, plug your social stuff.
Oh, yes. I'm also on, good grief, Lead Farms. I have Twitter at Lead Farms. Instagram is Lead. TikTok. YouTube. What else out there is social media?
Facebook.
That's a personal.
Your daughter's YouTube is very large.
Oh, yes. My daughter is Laura Farms, at Laura Farms on YouTube.
She's agent 99.
Yep, she's a subscriber, which is funny because, we could just typically just share information, right? I get the text alerts. I could just let Laura know. Apparently, this product is good enough for her to just go ahead and sign up on her own so she can try to out-trade her father.
Do you want to go into pricing at all, Snark, or?
Sure, it's $7.99 for one product, right? Because we have some people that just want corn, beans, wheat, cotton, etc. Or it's $15.99 a year for all the products.
Yep.
You use a promo code, you'll get 20% off. We'll probably keep that up for while you run your podcast.
Yep.
And so anybody listening that wants to check it out, you can also create a free account and just use the stoplight and see what we're talking about, momentum, and make your own decisions on it. I think you'll be fascinated watching that momentum go up and down. And if you watch the markets close enough, beans were in extreme momentum, and then all of a sudden we just sold off 60 cents. And, well, that's not surprising because we've seen it over and over again.
Well, great. I want to thank you guys both for coming. Cale left this morning from Omaha, or you were going through Omaha when you texted me, so drove over here this morning just for this.
Totally worth it.
Yep, and Snark's the biggest cheerleader of the podcast, and I really do appreciate it. So look forward to seen you guys grow and be successful. So I would highly suggest it. I've thoroughly enjoyed the text updates, and I can't wait to see where it goes because I think there's a lot more in front of it.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long.